I want to talk a little bit about how we planned our trip out west in our TR4A and some of the things we did well and some of the things we could have done better, organizing the trip and the car and luggage and whatever. So stick around. It's kind of interesting, I think, to go over it again after the fact. Hi, this is Dave with DavesTR4A and welcome back to my channel. This is going to be the first in a short series of videos outlining how we prepared to travel out west on our recent trip last June in our 1967 Triumph TR4A. If you haven't seen any of our travel videos on our trip yet, if you go to my YouTube channel, there's a playlist called The Trip Out West, and you can follow along on that. There's a total of 12 videos. In the upcoming videos, I'll be discussing things like how many sets of clothes we brought. Spoiler alert, we packed way too many clothes. Talk about luggage, what worked and what didn't. Comfort in the car, navigation, particularly trying to see as many sights as we could while we're out there, have a good time. As I've said before, I restored my TR4A not to be a concours winning car, totally original, but one that I could drive with as much confidence as possible on long drives, because that's really what I restored the car for. I just enjoy driving it, so a lot of this is going to be going over system improvements that I've made during the restoration, which a lot of it's covered in videos in my YouTube channel. So some of the things you're not going to be able to see, but the majority of stuff is covered in the other videos. So if you want to do what I did, you can at least see how I did it. And then at the end of the video, of course, I'm going to be going over what I looked at, checked, made sure was working properly before we left on our trip. Please add a comment if you have any questions or suggestions. So before I get into the whole logistics of how I prepared the car, a couple of people have asked to show our route that we took on our trip in June, which was 6,400 miles in our TR4A. So anyway, here's the route in very general terms. This just shows the general path we took. There was a lot of side trips we took and back and forth to go see different things and all that. So I think this was about maybe 5,000 miles, something like that. That didn't include, back and forth to Yellowstone 2 or 3 times and all over. And when we went into Rapid City, we went to several places there and kind of used that as our home base. So, but I'll talk about that a little more later. So preparing my TR4A for a long distance drive goes all the way back to my restoration goals when I bought the car in 2000 till when I finished it around 2015. Even back then, I was more interested in driving the car versus showing it. Car shows are a lot of fun, but the trailer queen always wins. Don't get me wrong. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with a concours winning restoration because we really need to have people that preserve the original intent of the car, and that's what car shows are all about. But nothing is going to beat the experience of driving into a parking lot 1,500 miles from home, and the car's an instant draw. We lost count of how many people walked up to us as we unloaded the car at the hotel asking, "Did you guys drive that thing all the way here? Did you trailer it?" Or driving through places like the Grand Tetons with a top down. So the following improvements you're going to see are, in what my opinion, improves the reliability of the car without changing the quality of the car or the driving experience. So I did changes to the cooling system, the ignition, the electrical system, the drivetrain, gauges, and comfort. After looking at these pictures, first of all, I have to apologize a little bit about how filthy the engine compartment is, but I drive this car, so but I do normally try to keep the engine compartment pretty clean, but you'll just have to kind of bear with me on this. Well, let's start with the cooling system first. As you can see, I've done several upgrades to that, starting with replacing the original radiator with a aluminum one from Wizard Cooling. Pretty happy with that. I do run 50/50 antifreeze in it with distilled water, and I'll change the coolant out every other year, completely flush the systems because I don't want to have any kind of galvanic corrosion starting between the cast iron block and the aluminum radiator. So, and you can see I also have a 16-inch fan, a puller fan on the back of the radiator, and I got rid of the the original bellows type top hose there and went to silicone because the original cloth covered one was just terrible. It lasted a couple of years, and then you could squeeze it and it felt like a sponge. It was actually literally decomposing in my hand. So anyway, let's move on from there. So moving over to the left side of the engine, you can see on the down tube that goes from the water pump down to the bottom of the radiator has a thermostatic switch in it. I bought that from Revington TR in England. I can't remember honestly how much it was, but it wasn't as expensive as I thought. I think it might have been $40 for the stainless steel down tube and the thermostat, and I think it closes, or it opens at 180 degrees and closes at like 210 or something like that, Fahrenheit. So, but it's worked flawlessly. And I also have a manual override switch for the fan, but I've only used it a couple of times just to test it. But the fan usually just kicks on and off by itself. The only way I notice it's on is the RPMs drop a little bit. So that's it for the cooling system. Moving on, let's talk about the ignition for a minute. The distributor I'm running on my car is one of these 123 distributors from the Netherlands. It's just bulletproof. It's a great distributor. Comes with like 17 advanced curves in it, I think, and it fires each spark plug 3 times, and when it's turned to fire the plug, and it balances all 4 spark plugs as far as output voltage between them as the car's running. So it's just a great piece. It's very low maintenance. I'll buy a rotor and a cap for it every year just for the heck of it. But it's just a wonderful part. Next is the electrical system, and we'll start with the wire harness. So I ended up going with Dan Masters' advanced auto wiring harness for a couple or several reasons actually. It number one, it uses the same color code as the stock Triumph wiring harness, so it makes things a little easier if you're trying to troubleshoot things, or if you're holding a wire in your hand, that blue-white is for the headlights, so stuff like that. So it also has some additional features that the stock harness doesn't have, since it's relay controlled. Number one, when you turn the key on, it energizes a 40 amp relay that powers everything in the car. So nothing goes through the ignition switch except the coil current to drive that 40 amp relay. So it really takes a load off the ignition switch. Secondly, there's an emergency flasher circuit that's incorporated into it also. So you can, on a TR4 or 4A, you can now have emergency flashers. I think I ended up using them once or twice, but it was only because we were stopped because somebody else was stopped in front of us. So I just didn't want somebody to run in the back of us. So anyway, now the only downside, as you can see, it's not really protected from the weather, so it has to be mounted somewhere inside the car. So what I ended up doing was mounting mine in the passenger side footwell way up in the front. So but yeah, it's a great product. If you can do any kind of basic wiring, you can certainly install this, and it's much better and more cost effective actually than the stock one, because it's actually about the same price. Next up on the electrical circuit is my alternator. I also installed a AC Delco. I forgot the model number, but it's a pretty generic alternator that you can pick up anywhere for like, I don't know, $50 or $60, I guess. It's a 60 amp alternator. I've had no problems with it whatsoever. And the advanced auto wiring harness came with a plug to be able to plug right into it. So it was just a piece of cake to put it in, other than making a special bracket for it. Next up is the TR6 wiper motor upgrade that I did last year. This is electrical, but it's also safety and comfort. The standard TR4A wipers are, in my opinion, worthless. Maybe somebody's got a car out there that is satisfied with the operation of the stock wipers, but unless you're looking for a trailer queen, totally authentic car, they're just awful. People say, well, you can use Rain-X, that's just as good. No, it's not. Once you've made this change, or you drive a TR6 that has their standard wiper motor in it, there's just no comparison. It wasn't an easy change. I do have YouTube videos on how I did that to my car because it involves swapping out or sourcing a set of TR6 wheel boxes and the tubes that go between them because they're a different length than the stock ones, and also getting a motor, a wiper motor, and a wiper switch, which is kind of like finding a unicorn, and also the wire harness to power the TR6 motor. But it is possible, and I did find an alternative switch that has a delay feature on it that I'm going to be incorporating possibly in the future here, and I'll do a YouTube video on that. Then I had to make an aluminum mounting bracket, which wasn't real hard to do. That's in my YouTube video on that also. So anyway, I would strongly recommend, if you're going to drive your car, and especially out west where the weather is very unreliable, to say the least. It can be sunny in the morning and thunderstorms in the afternoon. So you really want to protect yourself and be safe. So really think about upgrading these wipers because the TR6 motor is just like night and day. Oh, and one unintended consequence of having to install a TR6 wiper motor switch is there's an electric switch for a washer. So I picked this one up on Amazon. I think it was $20, and you got the reservoir with a pump on it and fittings and tubing and everything. So that was a nice win. Plus, the bracket fits on the original TR4A mount without I pulled the wire cage off, but this thing actually slides right down on the bracket. So didn't even have to drill another hole, just fit right in. The next thing I want to talk about are drivetrain updates. The first and most important one for long distance travel is you have to have an overdrive. With the overdrive, I was able to go 80 miles an hour all day long going through Wyoming and down through there because the speed limits out west are quite a bit higher than they are here in Ohio. So anyway, got that. Had some initial problems getting the transmission and overdrive working, but I had some great support from my friends Jerry Van Vlack and Ed Woods with the Western Pennsylvania Triumph Association, and John Esposito at Quantum Mechanics, and but now it's been in the car for I don't know, quite a while. And we drove all the way around the west, 6,400 miles, and ran perfect. So anyway, there's that. And then the second thing was I coming back from Watkins Glen, I had lost the differential. I think it ran out. I think the pinion seal went is what the problem was, and enough oil drained out of it leaked out of it that it ruined the differential. And it was going to cost about $1,400 to rebuild it. So I started looking around and ended up buying a complete kit from Richard Good to install his upgraded hubs, rear hubs, the CV joint, half shafts, and a R200 differential with limited slip differential. That was actually, the ratio I got was 3.669 to 1, I think, and stock on the Triumph is 3.7, so that was pretty darn close. I want to talk a little bit about gauges and the dash controls next. So I always had trouble with the stock electric temperature gauge, and I ended up trying to fix it by replacing the sending unit a couple times, and it moved a little bit, but it didn't seem to really be where it was supposed to be. Although the gauge has had a C and an H on it, there was no actual temperatures or anything. But so anyway, what I ended up doing was replacing my electric temperature gauge with a mechanical one, as you can see. So this is a standard gauge that you see on a lot of BMC cars, and it combines the temperature and oil pressure into one gauge, and they're both mechanical. So this left a hole where the old temperature gauge used to live, but the engine has a aluminum sump in it that are on it that incorporates a bung for adding a temperature gauge for the oil. So I looked around and I found an oil temperature gauge that has a bezel that looks pretty close to what the other gauges are. It's a 52 millimeter gauge, so it'll fit in the hole just fine. And then the only other change I made was to replace the stock amp gauge with a voltage gauge, since I'd replaced the stock generator with an alternator. So I should probably make a shameless plug about my voltage stabilizer that I developed. This is basically from my problems I had with all my gauges. Seemed to the fuel gauge and the temperature gauge were just all over the place. I finally ended up tracing it back to one of these original type voltage stabilizers. So I developed a replacement. It's a solid state. I've designed the two circuit boards that go into the thing. There's a top one here. You can see it's got the terminals in it. The part is pretty solid, I have to say. I've sold 100 of them so far, and very happy with the results. It's always nice to see or hear back from somebody that said that they're so happy their fuel gauge is actually not going to leave them stranded anymore. So if you want to contact me directly to see about getting your voltage stabilizer rebuilt, you can contact me directly at dconit@gmail.com. I'll put my address in the description below. But anyway, it's a pretty solid part. Each part is tested multiple times during assembly, and it's burned in at 150% of its normal load for 24 hours, and then a final test before it ships. So it's pretty solid. As you can see, they're actually serialized too, so I can keep track from a quality standpoint on who got what, and if there's any problems, I can trace it back to that lot of parts. So anyway, that's it for the gauges now. So I want to talk a little bit about the changes I made to the controls. If you look at the switch plinth, things have changed around a little bit there. The knob immediately to the left of the ignition switch is now the emergency flasher switch. Basically what I did is I have two relays that pulls in to switch from the turn signal flasher to the emergency flasher. So that works pretty well. Right next to that is, new to me, TR6 windshield wiper switch and windshield washer switch. So and that rotates clockwise to turn them on, and you push it, pump fluid onto the windshield. And then if you look below the radio, there's three standard controls for the heater, but there's also, you'll see there's a little switch in between the fan switch and the outer control on each side. And what those are for is, as I'll show you here in a minute, I have a Miata seats that I installed in the car. I ended up installing a set of seat heaters that I got from Moss. They're running off the 10 amp circuit that was originally supposed to be for electric fuel pump in the advanced auto wire harness. So it has like a high and a low. So those work pretty. We used them once or twice on the trip when we were up in the mountains, but they're there, like if we want to have the top down and have a little heat on our backs. And then to the right underneath the box, you'll see some power ports that I put in. And I just picked that up at O'Reilly's, I think. It's got a 12-volt plug-in socket there for like a GPS or like a Garmin. And then it's got two USB charging ports right next to that. So that's the inside of the car as far as instrument changes. So here's the comfort feature that I'm most happy with and proud of, is adding Miata seats to the car. These are NA series seats that I bought in a junkyard down in Kentucky. The car had rolled with the top up. The outside was completely trashed, but the seats were perfect. There was one little tear in the driver's seat. You'd have to look to find it. So I had the cloth for the longest time. When I installed them, I put the seat heaters in. I showed you the controls for that here just a second ago. But so anyway, I bought the leather kit from Interior-Innovations. It's a website. It was kind of cool because they were like $340 at the time. This was back in 2020, right when the pandemic hit. You can see it's got the TR4A logo in the seat back there. What I did was I took a picture of my key fob and sent it to him, and he says, "Oh yeah, we can do that." So about 4 weeks later, This is like right in the middle of the pandemic. My wife the doorbell rings, and she goes down there and comes back up with this box that's less than a foot square. And she says, "What did you buy from Afghanistan?" And I said, "Nothing." So anyway, that's where the seats came from. I'm assuming there's some kind of leather. I don't know if it's a cow or not, but they're very, very comfortable. It really made the trip very, very comfortable in the car. Even Colleen liked them. So yeah, they were a great addition to the car. I had heard all kinds of bad things about the original style water valve for the heater. Since it's basically you're squeezing two pieces of rubber together apparently to stop water flow into the heater, and they're just notorious for coming apart, and you almost have to bring along an extra one with you in the trunk of your car and spare parts. So this is a newer style. A lot of people are installing them in their Triumphs. It uses a ball valve instead of the rubber diaphragms, and it's pretty much of a direct install. You have to do a little modification to the cable. I showed that there's a video that I did on my YouTube videos on installing one of these valves, of how I connected the control cable to that arm that rotates back and forth. The other thing is that the effort to control the valve is about a third of what the original one was. So the operation on this is very, very smooth and easy compared to the original. So I definitely recommend doing this install if you just drive the car around town. I'm going to talk just for a minute about luggage racks too, because it's although it's probably should be in the luggage part of this whole thing, it's more about comfort really, because you can put a lot of stuff on a luggage rack. And this one I bought, it takes about you can take it on and off pretty easily. It's got brackets that mount on the front, up underneath the hood or the trunk hinges, and then it bolts to the same bolts that hold the top of the license plate on the car. So it takes maybe 10 minutes to put it on and take it off. So but it's a great way to get a lot of stuff out of the car. So and I want to talk about the bag that we use too for the back of this thing, but that's in the next video. So this is probably one of the longest videos I've ever done. Thank you for sticking around, as I said, and watching to the end. So the first thing that I want to stress is I think you really have to have the utmost confidence in your car. And that to me relates to how much of the work do you actually do yourself in your car. If you're paying somebody to maintain your car, this is probably not the kind of trip you want to take, because something may happen. You need to be able to troubleshoot on the road and solve problems as they come up. Next is start with some short drives, just go on club outings, whatever, towards maybe 50 or 100 miles, and just work your way up. That's kind of what I did. I was lucky enough to have some friends in clubs that were out of the state of Ohio, and had opportunities to drive to Watkins Glen to go for the vintage car races there. And then that's, or maybe it was about almost 500 miles, I guess, by the time we got to Watkins Glen. But we broke it up into 2 days the first time, and then the second time we just did it in 1 day. But, it's just kind of build your confidence in the car. Do some, the next thing maybe would be, like I said, some overnight trips. Just slowly go farther and farther. As you do that, you'll be able to see what the weak points in your car are and address those. And if you want to upgrade something, just do it. Don't worry about having to deal with people that are telling you that the car's not correct anymore or whatever. So you almost have, like I said, you almost have to decide, do I want to have a show winner or do I want to have a driver, and just go from there. Well, at this point, I know I'm probably going to remember something after I post this video that I should have mentioned in this video. But anyway, I got to stop at some point. So anyway, again, thank you for sticking around and watching this video. And I hope I gave some information to someone that would help them try to do the same thing. These drives are just fantastic. This was a once-in-a-lifetime trip that we took. My wife had a great time, too, and we saw some beautiful scenery, met some awesome people. You just don't meet people like that if you're driving, your daily driver. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll try to get the next video out on selecting luggage and clothes and stuff like that very soon. So thanks again. That's it for now. Please like and subscribe.